We've had conversations with many businesses and individuals wanting to host a podcast, even needing a podcast, but they're not comfortable hosting it themselves. Or they don't even have someone internally that could host the podcast or even should host the podcast, dare I say. So what do they do? What do you do? Welcome to Profitcast. I'm the real Brian.
I'm Seth Silvers. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for joining us here today. This is a really important question that I think a lot of people need to be talking about and asking is that if you want a podcast or you need a podcast for your business, should you host the show internally? Should you have an internal host, whether it's you, whether it's one of your employees, whether it's the CEO? In fact, Seth, you were just reading an interesting article about CEOs maybe shouldn't be hosting their own podcast. And so there's a lot around this. Yeah. And if you want to even dive into this, I'm kind of curious if you have any quick highlights from that, just to start this off.
Well, yeah, I'll just plug this because like we had one situation in the last year where it was a really interesting podcast that we spent quite a bit of time and the company spent quite a bit of resources building the strategy for. And kind of from the beginning, we said, like, do you have time to do this? Do you have the ability? And they were like, oh yeah, we'll make time. And at the end of the day, we just couldn't find the time to like actually record. We recorded a few test episodes. And ultimately, this was actually the first time that we've actually fired a client because it was becoming such a thing where it was like we were doing everything we could, but we just couldn't get the proper time commitment. And so finally we said, well, like we'll connect you with whoever you want in the industry, any way we can help. But we kind of just said like, this isn't working. And I think that podcast would be there today if we would have made the suggestion early on, hey, let's find a third-party host. Let's find somebody else to host your show.
Yeah.
And I didn't really have the experience at that. I kind of saw third-party hosted shows or different things like that. And I didn't look down on them, but I didn't really like understand how valuable it is in some arenas. And then, we were just mentioning, I was just on LinkedIn and the head of strategy at Lower Street, which is one of my favorite agencies, linking to a blog post that they just released, kind of talking about this idea of like your CEO probably shouldn't host your podcast. Sometimes sometimes they should, but there's a lot of other options. And so I think the point of this today is a lot of people don't know there are options. I think there's a lot of CEOs and a lot of businesses that they're not doing podcasting because like, well, we don't have the time to do it. And they don't know that there's actually other options there to make the podcast happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting too, because I really can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation with businesses, business owners, entrepreneurs, and every one of them, I need to do a podcast for my business. I need to, or my company, we absolutely need a podcast. And usually they have a really good reason for it. And they usually have a really great idea for a show too. And so I'm like, yeah, absolutely. You need to do this. But then they're going, well, usually what'll happen is I'll ask them, a month or 2 months, like, why haven't you started your show yet? Well, I don't know. I'm not comfortable behind the mic. I'm not comfortable in front of the camera. I'm like, you can hire somebody else to do this. You don't need to do this yourself. Or you could have somebody come in that interviews you even. You're the expert of your own company, right? But you don't have to be the solo host here. And I mean, I've had this all the time. Like you said, I think this was a fascinating thing. You said, of course we have the time to do it. Yeah, right. I mean, you're busy doing your thing. And that's the thing, adding additional things into your plate and we talked about this in the last episode. Consistency is one of those things that people say it is important, right? And it is something that if you are not consistent, you kind of sabotage trust with your listeners and your viewers. So having that consistency shows them that you're going to be there. You're going to be on time. You're going to be, there every single week like they expect you to be. And so if you're too busy for that, then you got to look out for some help here, and that's, so I really do think that you need to be asking the question, should you or someone internally from your company be hosting your podcast? And it's not even necessarily about just time or comfort. It's also, could an internal host or you actually hurt your podcast too? And the answer is absolutely it could. So, hiring somebody professional. And by the way, we touched on this in episode 119. It's been a while ago. We talked about why you should hire a professional in general. Now, this was a lot of things. This was a host, this was a coach, consultant, etc. But we're diving in just to the idea of hiring a professional host right now. And so I wanted to go through a couple of things here as far as what a professional host for hire can actually bring to your company if you want to get into this one. But first, before we get into this, Seth, I was curious, when you think of a professional host for hire, I know you and I have talked quite a bit and we've worked together on this, but before you met me, what did this even occur to you at all? And also if it did, What was your thought on it?
I don't think so. Like, and we met probably 3 years ago. So yeah, before I met you, I didn't really know that this was a big thing. I love it. I think especially for, I guess you're right. It's not really a big thing, but I would say now I know a handful of people that this is what they want to do, or this is what they have done. The interesting thing about all of this is I think that this really exposes the purpose of a podcast. I think that we see a lot of small businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of coaches, consultants, where they are starting a podcast to build their own personal reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that should not be a goal. But if you are doing that, then you have to host your podcast.
Sure.
If the goal of the podcast is to solve problems for your customer, then the question becomes, what's the best way to do that? Who's the best person to do that? Maybe it's you, but maybe it's also saying, maybe it's bringing a professional in here who can be really curious. And so I think if we're actually thinking about the podcasts from the perspective of our podcast exists to solve problems for people, then I think it can kind of like open it up to where it's like, not every CEO wants a big personal brand. Like not every CEO wants to have their face out in front of everybody else. But if you're launching a show to help solve problems for your target audience, then I think it makes more sense to actually ask the question of who should host this podcast.
Yeah.
And when I first met you, we had mostly been doing podcasts in that kind of early stage business, entrepreneur, solopreneur, coach, consultant space. And so most of the reasons that people were launching podcasts around me, it made sense where it was like, oh, this is a personal brand play.
Sure.
But as you get into like bigger businesses where it's less of a personal brand play and more of like a brand play for a corporation or for a company, then I think you kind of have more solutions at your disposal, if you will. But I think it always comes back to the question. We pretty much ask the question why every episode. We just talked about this a lot with data. But it's like, why are you launching the podcast? If you're launching the podcast just to elevate your personal brand, you probably need to be the host. If you're launching a podcast for a bunch of other reasons, which there's a bunch of other reasons you could be, then I think you actually have permission to ask who should be the host, which is an important question to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's funny kind of how I fell into this too, because I've been behind the mic since I was in middle school. And for me, it was this whole idea of, I want to be a radio DJ. I want to be a morning show DJ. So for me, it was this passion. I wanted to learn and grow, and I listened and I absorbed and I practiced. And I mean, it was just this thing that I've been doing since I was a early teenager. So when I got asked by a couple of different businesses to say, hey, we love what you do with your own shows. Would you be our host? We'll pay you to host our show. Would you do this? And I thought, oh my gosh, like this, sure. I mean, I never thought about this before, you know? So it's been many years ago now, but I thought, yeah, this is actually a good idea. And then the more I got to learn about it, the more they were saying, one, we want a different voice than us. Two, I've heard from other companies too, that saying we really don't have anyone that has any training whatsoever on this. And then the other thing is we simply don't want to worry about it. We really want to just say, we need a podcast, but we want to hire that. We have the money, but we don't have the time. We need to hire this out to a professional or professionals who can actually take this on and do what we want them to do for us. And it's a marketing effort. It's a beautiful thing. And so it goes back to that zone of genius thing too, where you need to do what you're best at, what you're gifted in, and what no one else can do but you. And for most people, hosting a podcast is not that. Well, Brian, how can you be an expert in every topic in every industry? And the answer is, well, you can't. I mean, I can be an expert in some, and I can learn quick, and I am a very fast learner personally, right? But you do have to consider that when hiring a professional. In that moment, you might think, well, we hire the professional host to run the show, to keep the flow going, to make sure that everything is working. And it's also to interview the experts or to co-host with an expert. So maybe as a whatever you are, like if you are the CEO or the business leader, or maybe you're the marketing manager or whatever, right? You might come on as the expert, but you don't want to be the main host. You want to be the person that we ask questions to. We lead the conversation. But there's a lot in here. And in fact, I'm just going to go through I wrote down a ton of stuff here, and I just want to go through a few things.
I mean, also, you've done this. So to those people that are listening, a lot of the longtime listeners probably know that you've done this, but like, this is one of the main ways that you've earned a living in podcasting. So when we tell when we tell clients to say, what's the problem and who's the right person to speak to the problem, it's like you have a lot of experience in this. So I'm excited to kind of see some of your thoughts throughout this.
I love this stuff. Like, you ask me, what do I really want to be doing? What's my passion? It's hosting podcasts. And so if I had, multiple clients constantly and my day was full of just recording podcasts, I mean, man, I'd be in heaven. Like, that's what I do. And I think that's something to remember too, because not everybody has a passion like this. Or you have a passion for something, but it's very different than this. So keeping that in mind. So a few things here. I'm just going to kind of go off of some things that I really believe a professional podcast host brings to the table. And it's not just me, by the way. Like, I'm telling, yes, this is what I do, but there are others out there. And Seth, you mentioned that there are a few now that are wanting to do this. When I got into this, there was literally 2 or 3 of us that anyone knew about anyway. Professional podcast hosts, they keep the conversations engaging, right? They maintain a smooth flow. They bring a polished delivery. Equipment, right? This is one of the biggest things. In fact, it's so funny how many times, especially, as an editor and producer, we've both done this too, where you are given awful audio. The microphones are terrible. The echo is awful. There's a waterfall going in the background it's their air conditioner. It's just little things that you just kind of go, these are things that as a host, we recognize this on the fly. We know to eliminate this. We have the professional equipment already. We don't have to go out and buy it and train others on how to use it. So there's so many things like that. Garbage in, garbage out, right? You can only fix so much in the post editing. So if you're given awful audio, you can kind of work with it, but there's only so much you can do. So, the professional host can really help ensure that it is a very professional sound, and also help guests, co-hosts, etc., to make sure that they've also got the best possible sound too, so that they're represented well. I mean, this is another thing that I think a lot of people don't think about. They just get on these Zoom calls, they record these Zoom calls, somebody's talking into some internal, laptop microphone, and it's this echoey thing, and it sounds awful. How does that professional, that interviewee, how do they come across? Do they come across as a professional business owner, or do they come across as somebody who got lazy? These are just little things like you don't think about the subconscious mind a lot of times. Another thing that a professional host can bring, it brings you stronger brand representation. Interestingly, I found this one, interesting to think about as I was going through this, that a professional host can effectively communicate your brand's message, tone, values, all of that, while still building trust with the audience and also creating an engaging aspect for the audience. Because this goes back to likability. If the host is likable, then that's a good thing, right? So it creates a good brand for you. And then also it enhances the credibility, I think, of your business and your podcast as well, which makes everything that you do more appealing to your clients, partners, and even peers. Interviewing expertise, and we're going to be doing a couple of episodes on this. I think we're going to do a short form episode on interview skills, and then we'll probably do a deep dive into it as well. But a professional host, if they know what they're doing, is able to conduct interviews as they know best, by the way. And believe me, so Peter Jackson, director of the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I had a friend who had Peter Jackson on his podcast, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. It's Peter Jackson, right? And my friend said it was the worst interview he has ever done in his entire life, and he didn't air it. Now, a professional host could probably guide that conversation better, maybe steer that person back a little bit more to kind of, no, let's come back to here, let's do this. And then with some creative editing, you could probably still make it salvageable. But sometimes that's what happens. And so are you able to handle situations like that on the fly? Do you have the training and experience to be able to handle train wrecks and other things like that? So these are big things, right? Time and resource efficiency is another big one. You as a business, yes, you might be paying a professional to do this, but there's a lot of preparation, management, scripting if necessary, scheduling, so many different things that go into the hosting side of things. It's amazing to me how many people say, well, you just turn on the microphone and start talking, right? That is a train wreck waiting to happen if you have that attitude. It's just not the way it works. So having a professional host takes all of this off your plate. It frees you up again to do the things that you do best that others can't do for you. So a good host, a professional host, can handle the unexpected, tech issues, difficult guests, like I mentioned with Peter Jackson. And I don't think he was difficult. I think he just maybe was uninteresting, or he rambled, or I don't really know the whole thing. Nervous guests, this is common.
Yeah.
They can ensure great transitions. I just cannot stress how important this is right here. I've been in multiple different industries. I've been in the wedding industry, and believe me, when a wedding starts to go wrong, you have destroyed that bride's one day, right? You have to be adaptable and you have to be able to fix things on the fly. Same thing goes with a podcast. Many cases, these guests don't have a backup day that they can come and do a second recording with you. They're busy, right? You got to make sure it goes right now, and even amidst things that may happen. So Too many people think that they can figure this out, and sure, some can, but the reality is most really cannot. So a lot of variables get thrown at you in the moment all the time. And if you have the training and experience, you can do this. And if you don't, it's likely to cause a train wreck. So Seth, what have been some of your experiences with adaptability and all of this kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think the like figure it outness is pretty important with stuff like this, which adaptability is way better. So I just took a short word and made it longer and not even a real word. But
figure it outness, I like that.
Figure it outness. That's but I like that. That's kind of a characteristic. Like some people are just better at solving problems that come up because you will have tech challenges. You'll probably have to switch recordings or switch platforms, or like all of this stuff just is bound to happen when you're podcasting for long enough. I never did this as official as you did. But when I first started Story On and we were getting podcasting clients, they would be like, well, can you co-host with me? Because you're good at asking me questions. So can you just interview? And I was like, sure. Like that means you'll pay us to edit the episodes, right? Like, yeah. So I think at one point I was I was on air for probably 5 or 6 shows. Mm-hmm. And it very quickly became a thing where it was like, I'm not going to be able to build this company if I'm continuing to run all these podcasts. But it was a really good learning experience for sure to be able to see. And it was incredibly valuable for those CEOs to not feel like they had to be the only, like it took the pressure off of them to where they weren't having to feel like they were the only ones that were responsible for the show being done well.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Brian, how do people find podcast hosts? Like if a CEO is listening to this, if they're like, cool, we want a podcast, but I sure don't want to host it. Like, what do you do? How do you go about finding a host, and who is the right person to host your podcast if it's not you as the business owner?
Podcast host. If you actually Google podcast host, it comes up with hosting platforms. So Captivate, Libsyn, Buzzsprout, all that. So that's actually a problem. But if you say like the voice of your podcast, nobody's searching for that kind of thing too. So when it comes to finding things, there are issues with the actual terms, but we are hosts of a podcast when, you host your own podcast. So that's a problem.
I Googled podcast host for hire. There's like some Reddit threads of people that don't have good answers. And then there's a couple companies, and then there's like, it pulls up Upwork and Fiverr and freelancing.com and like voices.com for like voice actors.
Yeah.
So there are some places where you can find freelancers, but I also imagine you probably don't just want to find like some random person who will say yes if you ask them. Like you probably want to be a little bit more thoughtful than that.
Well, and that's the thing. So when you're looking at who you're actually going to hire to do it, I think, you want to have examples of a podcast that this host has already done. So, and granted, I need Seth, I need help getting my website ranked up and all that kind of thing. But the reality is that on my actual website page, it's just a single page. I do have examples of podcasts that I host. So you can hear me in action. Now, one of the things, just because I have a style on a specific podcast does not mean that that's the style that I'm going to do for your podcast. And so I think and this is something I learned in the wedding industry too, is that you would share an example of something that other brides and grooms had done that was really cool. But because it was to the tune of a country song, they didn't like it because they hated country. And it's like, well, you don't have to pick country music, So it's the same kind of thing here that I would caution businesses to look not necessarily at the style of the show as being the determining factor, but look at the host and what the host can do. The breadth or the depth of styles and stuff that the host is capable of doing, and then say, are you capable of doing what we need you to do? And here it is. So I think interviewing is really good. I think there's, looking and listening to the examples or watching examples if they're on video and that kind of thing too. But then as far as finding them, I don't know though if I would recommend an Upwork or a Fiverr scenario.
Yeah.
Because it is the gig economy. Typically the gig economy is significantly less experienced. I feel like if you're going to be doing, let's just say, hosting a business podcast, you need to be experienced. You need to offer high level service, and you need to be able to get in and make sure, because this is a lot of times too, you're dealing with NDI kind of things. You're dealing with, hey, everything has to be approved first. I've got many years behind the microphone and a few years in front of the camera as well. And because it's been a passion of mine and because I've practiced, it's easy and natural for someone like me to be able to do this kind of thing too. So consider that when you're looking for a host, look for someone who's very comfortable, has been doing this a while. Now, even you can always find the gems of, the younger people who are up and coming. They're coming into this kind of thing. Maybe they've only got a year of experience, but they're really good at what they do. That's also a wonderful consideration too, because I'm always for giving young talent a chance to grow and move into this, because a lot of times they're the fastest learners and the fastest growers. And so I think that's an amazing thing too. But another thing too, to keep in mind that as a professional host, it's easy and fun for me to talk with and interview other people, or to, hang out with another expert, that's part of it, and just have a good conversation and deliver exceptional value. So it's a very natural thing for me to do. And usually I get this a lot from guests that I have on, is they say, you made me feel so comfortable. And that was one of the best interviews I've ever done. And that's a huge compliment, because I put them in a place where they're ready to go. And they usually, what's funny is I hear these people on other podcasts, and they're dry, they're boring, they're not that interesting. Their voice is quaking and shaking because they're nervous. And then they get on with me and it's phenomenal. They just open up and they're just having this great conversation, and they deliver exceptional content, value, and education. It's just awesome. So the last thing I wanted to mention, and this is kind of a funny little thing, but in conferences and stuff like that, we've actually done in-person live recordings of podcast episodes, at a giant conference. Everybody's there, so you might as well just get everybody in the same room and do things, But I think this is something to consider too, is that I hosted 42 episodes in a 3-day period once, which I thought was amazing. I was invigorated. It filled me up. I had the privilege of doing that. But when I told that to other people, they were just like, shoot me now. I would never be able to do something like that. So I'm pointing out these types of traits and personality traits and skills and talents and that kind of thing too, because that's what's natural to me. And so when you're hosting podcasts, think about these things. We recommend batch recording podcasts. Are you capable of doing that? If you're an introvert and, the thought of talking to somebody for more than 15 minutes is just daunting or exhausting, then maybe that's not a good idea to be hosting a podcast, things like that. So I'm bringing up these ideas as there are ways to make this happen for your business where you don't have to do. In fact, there are many times where we'll have a client, they literally say, here's the direction we want you to go. Here's the mission of the show. Here's the topics. Here are the guests we want you to talk to. Go for it. The direction is given. You take it, you run with it, you publish it, and you let us know when it's done. And then we'll do whatever we need to do on our side. And that's it. It's a very hands-off experience for a lot of these clients, and it's tremendously beneficial for them. So I never set out to do this. I fell into it. I didn't even know this was a thing, but I thought, wow, not only am I enjoying this, but it's really valuable for the clients that I've worked with over the years. And so it's been great. But any further thoughts, Seth, that you have on this one?
A few things to throw in there, just as a lot of the people that we're often interacting with are trying to figure out how to do this for their business or for their brand. There might be somebody else at your company that is a good host for the podcast. If you are making your marketing director or sales director the host of the podcast, just be careful with that. You don't want it to be overly salesy. So I would say make sure that it's somebody that still has attributes of being a good host. And the other thing, which this is probably a whole nother episode that we haven't actually talked about, but this would be a great one, is co-hosting. And so this is something where we have a couple clients right now where they are co-hosting, like the owner of the company is co-hosting with somebody else at their company. And so again, that's great because sometimes maybe the co-host is the main host. Like you can do things to where you're not the only one doing it. And so I think sometimes that's going to be hiring a professional like Brian, who this is what they do, is they are a professional podcast host for hire, and they can kind of do the whole process. Also, there might be somebody inside your own company that could be a really, really good podcast host, or it might be a combination. Maybe it's you and somebody and you're co-hosting. So I just think those are good things to consider when talking through this. And the big idea here is you can still start a podcast that is beneficial for your brand, even if you are not the one to host it. And you might have people right around you that are really good interviewers, that are really good storytellers, and maybe they've wanted to podcast. So yes, go online, look around, call Brian, look for the professionals. Also look around you, look kind of in your immediate circles And there might be people that you could find kind of right under your nose that could be really supportive hosts.
Absolutely. With enough research, curiosity, asking why, practice, training, that kind of thing too. It doesn't have to take somebody that long to get good at what they're doing if they have that natural tendency already. So I think it's a really phenomenal idea to do this. It really it frees people up to be able to put good content out there without having to do it themselves if they're not comfortable, or without having to do it by themselves. So I love what you said there.
We talked in the last episode about how consistency isn't the only thing that's needed for podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
Like you need to be getting better and iterating and looking at all of these things. And similarly with this, on kind of the flip side, the best podcast strategy for you is the strategy that's going to keep you podcasting for the longest. Like podcasting is something that it gets more and more beneficial over time. And so I think that like sustainability is really important. One of our core values is sustainable excellence. So not just quality, not just excellence, not just the podcast looking really good, but I would even take an 8 out of 10 quality podcast over a 10 out of 10 if the 8 out of 10 could last for 2 years and the 10 out of 10 was done in 3 months.
Yeah.
So I think it's just worth considering of like, what is going to be the most sustainable option for you? And if you are really, really busy, then you probably at least want some hosting support and potentially want a complete, like done for you third-party host podcast solution. And they are out there. There is an increasing amount of people. I've probably met 5 people this year that are getting more into like podcast hosting for hire. So
That's
I think
great.
It's getting more popular. I think businesses just need to realize like it's an actual possibility.
Going back to what's the best exercise routine? The one that works for you. Yeah, the one that you do consistently. I mean, I agree with that. Like it really is. It's that what works best for you. So yeah, and I'm glad to hear that there are other hosts out there that are getting into this kind of thing because we need more. I mean, granted, I would love to work with you, of course, but I'm not the best fit for everybody all the time, and that's totally fine. So there need to be other options out there. And then ideally, we're all building each other up and helping each other out too, so that you have plenty to choose from as well. But anyway, yeah, so if you have any questions for us on this one, I mean, my door's open. If you want to talk about some of this stuff too, I can even offer some consulting stuff on this and help. If you've got a up and coming person who wants to do it and just needs some training, I mean, I can do that for you too. So something to consider. Reach out to us. We'd love to help. Of course, I'd love to work with you if you ever need a host or a co-host or anything like that too. But again, it's got to be the right fit. That's really what it comes down to. I don't want to work with a client that isn't the right fit. That's never good for anybody. But either way, you can get in touch with us, rockmypodcast.com. realbrianmedia.com is where I have my stuff on there, but it's also on rockmypodcast.com too. And then of course, storyon.co is where Seth is at. And so any questions, let us know. All of the descriptions and all of that stuff is in the YouTube description. If you're watching, it's below. If you're listening, it's in your app. You can get all that information and contact us directly. But yeah, we're here to help and answer any questions. But thanks again for checking the show out and being a part of our show. And we'd love to hear from you too. And if you have any questions you'd like us to answer or topics that you're like, hey guys, could you guys cover this one? Let us know. That'd be awesome. Appreciate it. Seth, thank you. And thank you for listening and thank you for watching.
Thank you.